walking in Muir Woods or Sequoia National Park and seeing the trees that might have been saplings when Jesus walked the earth, and they're still standing. It's pretty remarkable. To be in Death Valley, where there's hardly anything that lives, and you think you might be on the surface of the moon, but you're on earth. Those moments of solitude and silence moved me.
Spiritual disciplines are intentional practices that we carry out so that we can know God and love God more deeply.
Those things that we practice, that we commit ourselves to, as we say, disciplines, that are meant to draw us closer in our relationship with God.
That root word of disciple, and it's being a better disciple of Christ. Trying to put those practices in our lives that allow us to be more formed in the image that God created us to be.
One of the early church fathers, St. Ignatius, said that the purpose of the spiritual exercises or the spiritual disciplines were that we would give ourselves to God. Others have said it is a path to godliness. For me, I love the title of a book written by Eugene Peterson, A Long Obedience in the Same Direction. Long implies that it's something done over and over. Obedience to God, and in the same direction, there's the focus that takes place.
Disciplines allow us to create that sacred space, to maybe reflect, to create some time of silence and solitude, to help us to be more aware of how God is working around us and within us.
The spiritual disciplines force you to think about God and God's claim on your life and your response to that.
I believe that they also give us guidance. They help to give a person peace, or something that you can rely on, or something that you're disciplined to, that you're called to do, that you maintain within yourself, that I'm going to be disciplined to doing this, that I'm going to commit to this. And it also builds a commitment to God as well.
And spiritual disciplines are reminders. They call us back so that we don't miss out on this beautiful life that God has for us.
I practice prayer and meditation, of course. I was more of a person who, when my feet hit the ground in the morning, I start doing this, I start doing that. But I've been trying to, carve out that time to be committed to my relationship and committed to that discipline, that time of just spending time with God.
I wake up every morning and I thank God for 10 things. And I have a little tendency to get down or to slide sort of toward the darkness at times, and that has been life transforming for me.
The spiritual discipline that has meant the most to me is reading. Whether it's reading devotionally or a novel or sermons or books on art. I always keep a bunch of books going at the same time, and I always try to have one that I'm reading devotionally, but it has been in the reading that reading what others have said and experienced, and it's helped me in my walk with Christ.
For me, waking up and beginning the day with opportunities for prayer and Bible study and journaling. Journaling is one thing that in the past I haven't done very well, but I know that when I stop doing it, it's something that really does affect my openness to God. Silence
and solitude have been very important, and I discovered them almost by accident. The church I pastored provided me with a sabbatical 17 years ago, and during the course of that I spent some time at retreat centers. One of the retreat centers was outside of the village, and it is just a village, of Des Moines, New Mexico, in the northeast corner of New Mexico. And the retreat center was out on the side of an old extinct volcano, and I was the only person there. The everybody was gone that was on staff. They just gave me a key and said, you're on your own. That gives you a lot of time of solitude. I was there for a week, and silence. And I coupled that with reading. I read about 9 hours a day while I was there. And it was in the course of what I was reading, and I won't bore you with the details of that, but reading very different things that were very disturbing to my soul. And yet I had an experience in the middle of the night of looking up at the sky when it was the night of a new moon, and there's no ambient light out there in the middle of a mountain in New Mexico. And I saw stars I'd never seen before. And it was a spiritual experience that perhaps the most significant I've ever had in my life.
I think there are a lot of non-traditional disciplines, and people have been writing books about them. I pulled one out that I wanted to show you. It's called The Liturgy of the Ordinary. And this writer, Tish Warren, talks about really small life movements that can become spiritual disciplines. Like she talks about making the bed, for example, how even something so simple you can turn to become a spiritual discipline, so that you are intentional in the practice of this physical practice of making the bed, and you're thinking about your relationship with God even as you make that bed. Perhaps as you pull up the sheet, you're committed to confessing anything that's between you and God, so that you make each part of the bed making process a part of prayer. And I really do think these kinds of simple life practices can take on spiritual weight and spiritual significance if you're intentional about them.
Spiritual disciplines should be about that abundant life. They should bring joy and gratitude and abundance to your faith journey. And so if we get stuck in legalism or just doing that discipline, then that joy is gone. And that's not the purpose. And you're not opening yourself up to God. So we need to be careful that we're just not doing these things to do these things, practicing these practices to be more holy, but that we're doing them in order to be transformed.
I think there is a danger of, especially legalism, with spiritual disciplines, and also the danger of pride, because sometimes we can get so caught up in maintaining a discipline that we forget why we're doing the discipline. And so we will practice the discipline very faithfully. We're like soldiers carrying out our discipline, but we forget we're carrying out the discipline to know God more deeply, to serve God more freely, and we forget that it's all about this relationship with God. It's not about the discipline itself.
I think we can make the practice of spiritual disciplines idolatrous. If any of the spiritual disciplines don't somehow impact our lives, our walk with Christ, and change the way we live and respond to the claim of Christ on our lives, then I think we have to question, why am I doing that?
In legalism and idolatry, we're putting other things in front of God, and that's the exact opposite of what practicing the disciplines is supposed to be about. Practicing the disciplines is for us to make God more of a priority, for God to be more of our focus in what we're doing as we're practicing the disciplines.
Many of the disciplines that I personally carry out or try to practice are individual ones. But I think there are great benefits to working communally in this same sort of way, to have disciplines that we share. Those shared disciplines can give you purpose and really deepen your connection to each other as well as your connection to God.
When people lose their way, is there somebody paying enough attention that they don't just drift unnoticed? And that's not always easy. But for me, being a part of a group means having some loyalty to that group and some sense of accountability to that group and holding others accountable.
God created us for community, and so we need to practice these within community. I think it's important to think that they're not just about us growing and compartmentalizing our relationship with God, but it's how does that relationship, how does that openness to the Spirit live out itself in community for the sake of the world and bringing God's kingdom.
Some practical ways, and I'll just revert back to myself, just, making up your mind that you're going to carve out time to spend with God and deciding, what it is that you want to do. And I would say, as I'm doing, I start in small steps, committing to smaller things instead of having this grand plan for practicing the disciplines. And then, you never really take to it because you put so much in front of you. Keep it simple. Start with practical steps of what you're planning to do. Say, I'm planning to spend this much time with God, directly focused on God today.
Give yourself grace. Not to say I'm going to do all these disciplines at once, but to choose one, to choose two, to choose, especially when you're just starting out, the ones that speak to you, that say, oh, I really love talking and engaging with others. Okay, well then find a spiritual discipline about community. Maybe a Bible study, maybe a accountability partner, or a person that you can a mentor that you can just walk with and have conversations with. Maybe you're somebody who loves to write. Start with a journal, start small, and give yourself grace.
You have to make up your mind that you're going to do, whatever it is that you're doing. I had a young pastor friend say to me, how did you ever find time to read when you were a pastor? Well, and I said, I just did. I made it a priority. And I think it's that way with prayer, with Bible study. It has to become a part of the fabric of your life. It's just something that you do.
Another thing I think is helpful, and it's kind of the way I became more engaged in spiritual disciplines myself, was by setting apart Sundays as different days from the rest of the week. So even if I was not going to read scripture every single morning, pray every single evening, I could commit to do some particular spiritual practices on Sundays. And so if I could suggest anything to someone who wants to kind of get going on some spiritual disciplines, I would say start on a Sunday and set aside, even if it's 30 minutes, set aside 30 minutes to pursue a spiritual practice that can help you draw closer to God. And that'll be transformative. Even if that's all you do, that'll be transformative.